The alien girl stumbled through the dense forest, her legs trembling beneath her weight. Her sleek, silvery skin shimmered under the moonlight, blending seamlessly with the shadows of the trees. Each step sent sharp pain coursing through her injured body, but she pressed on, driven by a primal instinct to survive. Behind her, the distant hum of a search drone sent her heart racing. They were still hunting her, and she knew she was running out of time. Miles away, Sam Walker leaned against the hood of his old truck, staring at the night sky. He often escaped to the wilderness when life on Earth felt too overwhelming. A former medic, he had spent years in war zones patching up wounded soldiers and civilians alike. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about the past. The stars above held his gaze, and the silence of the forest wrapped around him like a familiar friend. He closed his eyes, savoring the tranquility. The peace shattered with a distant but distinct sound, a faint cry, almost too soft to notice. Sam straightened, his ears straining to catch it again. There it was, a muffled whimper, followed by the unmistakable rustle of leaves. Grabbing his flashlight, he ventured into the woods, his instincts kicking in. Years of experience told him something needed help. The alien girl collapsed against a tree, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her vision blurred as she clutched at the wound on her side. The crystalline fluid seeping from it glowed faintly, casting an eerie light on the forest floor. She didn't know this planet, and its strange inhabitants were as foreign to her as she was to them. Her people had always warned her about Earth, primitive, violent, untrustworthy. But she had no choice. If she stayed, she would die. Sam found her moments later, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. At first, he froze, his mind grappling with what he was seeing. She wasn't human. Her features were delicate yet otherworldly, and her glowing wound was unlike anything he'd encountered before. But beneath her alien appearance, he saw something unmistakable. Fear. "Hey," he said softly, lowering himself to her level. His voice was calm, steady, the same tone he used to reassure panicked patients. "I'm not here to hurt you. Can you understand me?" Her eyes, wide and luminous, locked onto his. She flinched as he reached out, but when her body gave no further resistance, Sam took it as permission. Carefully, he examined her wound, his medic's brain already cataloging the steps needed to stabilize her. The crystalline fluid was unlike any blood he'd seen, but the injury was familiar, deep, jagged, and dangerous if left untreated. "I can help you," he said, though he wasn't sure if she comprehended his words. Still, his tone seemed to reach her. She nodded weakly, her head drooping as exhaustion overtook her. Sam worked quickly, using his first aid kit to clean and bandage the wound as best he could. He couldn't ignore the feeling that this encounter was far bigger than either of them. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why did she seem so terrified? As he lifted her into his arms, her weight lighter than expected, a low rumble echoed through the trees. The search drones were closer now, their relentless pursuit narrowing in. Sam didn't know what was chasing her, but he could feel its intent. It wasn't friendly. "Hang on," he muttered, more to himself than to her, as he started back toward his truck. The alien girl clung to him weakly, her fingers curling into the fabric of his jacket. Behind them, the forest lit up with an unnatural glow, the search drone's beams slicing through the darkness like knives. Sam quickened his pace, adrenaline surging as the realization hit him. This wasn't just about helping a stranger. He was now caught in something far more dangerous than he could have imagined. As the truck came into view, Sam's mind raced with questions. Could he trust her? Could she trust him? And most pressing of all, would they even make it through the night? The answers, it seemed, would have to wait. For now, survival was all that mattered. Sam pushed through the thick undergrowth, his arms tightening around the alien girl's fragile body as he made his way to the truck. Her breathing was shallow, and her shimmering skin seemed to dim as if her energy were draining away. The glow from the drones behind them grew brighter, the mechanical hum rising to a sharp whine that sent chills down Sam's spine. He didn't dare look back. Every instinct screamed at him to move faster, but he knew one misstep could send them both tumbling. When he finally reached the truck, he laid her gently on the passenger seat. Her head lolled to the side, and he could feel the faint rise and fall of her chest. Her fingers twitched, as though trying to hold on to something invisible. "Stay with me," Sam muttered, his voice low and urgent. He climbed into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. The keys trembled in his hand as he turned the ignition. The truck roared to life, and he didn't waste a second, throwing it into gear and tearing down the dirt path. The headlights cut through the darkness, but the beams from the drones were gaining on them. His mind raced as fast as the wheels. Who was she? Why were those machines hunting her? He had no answers, only the unshakable certainty that if they caught her, she wouldn't survive. The alien girl stirred, her eyelids fluttering. She tried to speak, but her voice was faint, her words incomprehensible. Sam glanced at her, his hands tightening on the wheel. "I don't know what you're saying," he said, frustration creeping into his tone. "But you've got to hang on. I'll figure this out." The drone's lights suddenly fanned out, sweeping the area. Sam gritted his teeth and killed the truck's headlights, plunging them into darkness. He veered off the path, the tires bumping over uneven terrain. The forest closed in around them, branches scraping against the truck's sides. He drove blind, guided only by instinct and a desperate hope that the trees would shield them from view. After what felt like an eternity, the hum of the drones began to fade. Sam finally eased his foot off the gas, letting the truck roll to a stop. He turned to the girl, her face pale and glistening with sweat. Her eyes, though heavy-lidded, were watching him now, filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "You're safe for now," he said, his voice softer. "But we need to get you somewhere secure, somewhere those things won't find you." The girl's gaze flickered toward the forest, and she let out a sound, half a word, half a plea. It was faint, but it tugged at something deep within him. Sam reached for a bottle of water from the glove compartment, unscrewing the cap and holding it to her lips. She drank greedily, the action almost childlike, and for a moment, Sam felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in years: protectiveness. As she finished, she tried speaking again. This time, her voice was clearer, though the language was still foreign. The syllables were melodic, tinged with urgency. Sam shook his head. "I don't understand," he said, but he kept his tone calm, trying to reassure her. "Can you?" "I don't know, show me. Help me understand." She hesitated, then reached out a trembling hand. Her fingers brushed against his temple, and a warmth spread through him, not unpleasant but strange. Images flooded his mind, flashes of her world, a place bathed in soft light and filled with structures that seemed to hum with life. He saw her people, tall and elegant, their movements fluid and harmonious. Then came the destruction, ships descending from the sky, fire ripping through her home, and the cold, mechanical precision of the drones hunting them down. Sam gasped, pulling back instinctively. The connection broke, leaving him breathless. She stared at him, her expression apologetic yet determined. "Okay," he said, trying to steady his voice. "I get it. You're running from them. But why come here? Why Earth?" Her lips parted, and this time, though her words were halting, they were clear enough to understand. Safe, place, last chance. Sam's heart sank. Whatever was after her had destroyed her world, and now she was here, seeking refuge. But Earth wasn't safe, not if those drones could follow her. He leaned back in his seat, running a hand through his hair. "This is bad," he muttered. "Really bad." The girl tilted her head, her eyes searching his face. "Help?" she asked, the word heavy with meaning. Sam let out a slow breath. He couldn't leave her, not after what he'd seen. But helping her meant putting himself in danger, maybe even putting others at risk. He thought of the quiet life he'd built, the solitude he'd embraced after years of chaos. Yet here he was, on the edge of something far bigger than himself. "Yeah," he said finally, meeting her gaze. "I'll help you, but we've got to be smart about this." She nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. It was a small victory, but it was enough to keep him moving. Sam started the truck again, steering deeper into the forest. He knew of an old cabin miles away, a place he used to visit when he needed to disappear. It wasn't much, but it was off the grid, a perfect hiding spot for now. The drive was slow and tense, every sound in the night making him jump. The girl rested her head against the window, her body visibly relaxing for the first time. Sam couldn't help but glance at her every so often, the questions piling up in his mind. Who was she before all this? What kind of life had she left behind? And most haunting of all, what would happen if they couldn't outrun the things chasing her? As the cabin came into view, shrouded in shadows, Sam's grip on the wheel tightened. This was only the beginning. The cabin was dark and weathered, its wooden walls warped from years of abandonment. Sam pulled the truck to a stop and sat for a moment, staring at the structure. It wasn't much, just 4 walls and a roof, but it was isolated, surrounded by thick woods with no one for miles. He hoped it would be enough to keep them hidden, at least for a little while. The alien girl stirred in the passenger seat, her luminous eyes scanning their surroundings. She seemed wary, her body tensing as she looked at the cabin. Sam opened the door and stepped out, motioning for her to stay put. The forest was eerily quiet, and every shadow felt like it could be hiding danger. He grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and moved toward the cabin, his boots crunching softly on the ground. The door creaked as he pushed it open, the stale scent of dust and wood filling his lungs. He swept the flashlight across the room, a small living area with a sagging couch, a wood-burning stove in the corner, and a single table covered in cobwebs. There was no sign of anything, or anyone, inside. Satisfied, he returned to the truck and opened the passenger door. "Come on," he said, his voice low but calm. "It's safe." She hesitated, her fingers gripping the edge of the seat. Sam extended a hand, and after a moment's pause, she took it. Her touch was cool and light, almost weightless. As he helped her out of the truck, she winced, her injury reminding him how fragile she still was. He guided her into the cabin, the dim light from his flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. "You can rest here," he said, leading her to the couch. She sank into it, her movements slow and deliberate. Sam set his flashlight on the table, its beam angled upward to provide some light. He crouched in front of her, studying her face. Her skin had regained some of its faint glow, but she still looked weak. "I'll make a fire," he said, more to himself than to her. "It'll keep us warm." She watched him as he gathered wood from a pile near the stove. Her gaze was intense, almost analytical, as if she were trying to understand him. Sam worked quickly, stacking the logs and striking a match. The flames caught, flickering to life, and bathing the room in a warm golden glow. Once the fire was steady, he turned back to her. "We need to figure out our next move," he said. "Those things, those drones, they're not going to stop looking for you." She nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Danger, follow," she said, her words halting but clear enough to make Sam's chest tighten. She was right. They weren't safe, not here, not anywhere. "Do you know what they want?" he asked. "Why they're hunting you?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. For a moment, she didn't answer, as if searching for the right words, or the courage to speak them. Finally, she looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Power. Control. My people. We fight them. They destroy everything." Sam felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't just about her. This was bigger, much bigger. He rubbed a hand over his face, trying to process what she was saying. "And you. Why are you here? Why Earth?" She hesitated again, her fingers clutching the edge of the couch. "Safe place," she said, echoing her earlier words. "Last hope." Her simplicity didn't diminish the weight of her statement. Sam leaned back, his mind racing. If she was their last hope, what did that mean for Earth? Were those machines coming here next? He shook his head, trying to focus, one problem at a time. For now, they needed to stay alive. The night stretched on, the fire crackling softly in the stove. Sam sat by the window, his eyes scanning the darkness outside. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound made his muscles tense. The girl had fallen into a restless sleep, her breathing shallow but steady. He envied her ability to rest, even if only for a moment. Hours passed, and the forest remained quiet. But just as Sam began to think they might be safe, a faint, rhythmic hum reached his ears. His stomach dropped. He knew that sound. He moved to the girl, shaking her gently. Her eyes snapped open, wide with alarm. "They're coming," he said, his voice urgent. "We need to move." She sat up, wincing as she clutched her side. Sam helped her to her feet, his mind racing. They couldn't outrun the drones in the truck. It was too loud, too easy to track. The forest was their only chance. Grabbing his backpack and a flashlight, he led her out of the cabin and into the trees. The hum grew louder, the sound vibrating in the air around them. Sam glanced back, his heart pounding. Bright lights flickered through the trees, sweeping across the forest floor. He tightened his grip on the girl's hand, pulling her along as they weaved through the dense undergrowth. The drones weren't just searching anymore. They were closing in. One beam of light passed dangerously close, illuminating the two of them for a split second. Sam ducked, dragging the girl with him behind a fallen log. The light swept past, but he knew it was only a matter of time before they were spotted. The girl clutched his arm, her breathing rapid. Sam could feel her fear, and it fueled his determination. "We'll make it," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. The hum intensified, joined now by a deeper, more menacing sound, the whirring of mechanical limbs. Sam's pulse quickened. Whatever those drones were sending after them, it wasn't just machines anymore. "We have to keep moving," he said, his voice tight with urgency. The girl nodded, and they pushed on, the forest around them growing darker and more oppressive with each passing moment. Just ahead, a cliff loomed, its jagged edge cutting off their path. Sam skidded to a stop, his mind racing for a solution. Behind them, the lights and sounds of their pursuers were closing in, relentless and unyielding. He turned to the girl, his voice firm. "You have to trust me. No matter what happens, stay with me." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, he saw something that made his breath catch. "Faith," she nodded, and together, they faced the cliff, the next step uncertain, the danger pressing in on all sides. Sam's mind raced as he stared at the cliff, its jagged edge disappearing into darkness below. The drop was too far to survive, and there was no way around it, not with the drones closing in. He felt the girl's hand tremble in his, her fear palpable. The hum of the machines grew louder, their beams slicing through the trees like searchlights. They were out of time. Then he saw it, a faint glimmer of light across the canyon, hidden among the trees on the opposite side. It wasn't natural, not like the moonlight or the glow of the drones. This was different, almost like a beacon. Sam hesitated, his instincts torn between curiosity and survival. Whatever it was their only chance. "Over there," he said, pointing to the light. The girl followed his gaze, her eyes narrowing, as if she recognized it. She nodded, her grip tightening on his arm. "We need to jump," she said, her voice strained but resolute. Sam blinked at her. "Jump? Are you crazy? We'd never make it." She took a deep breath, her expression hardening. "Trust me." Before he could protest, she stepped closer to the edge, her otherworldly glow intensifying. Sam's heart pounded as he grabbed her arm, his voice urgent. "Wait, if you're wrong." She turned to him, her eyes steady. I'm not. There was no time to argue. The drones were almost upon them, their mechanical limbs crashing through the undergrowth. Sam took a deep breath, his pulse roaring in his ears. This is insane, he muttered, but he didn't let go of her hand. Together, they leaped. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The wind roared in Sam's ears as they plummeted toward the darkness below. He braced himself for impact, his body tense, but then something extraordinary happened. The girl's glow erupted, surrounding them in a cocoon of light. The air seemed to shift, almost as if the very fabric of reality bent around them. They didn't hit the ground. Instead, they landed softly on the opposite side of the canyon, the light dissipating as quickly as it had appeared. Sam stumbled, his legs trembling beneath him. He turned to the girl, his chest heaving. What? How did you do that? She didn't answer, her gaze fixed on the beacon ahead. We have to go, she said, her voice urgent. It's not safe yet. Sam wanted answers, but the urgency in her tone left no room for questions. He nodded, following her as she moved toward the light. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion and adrenaline. What had just happened? How had they survived that jump? And more importantly, what was she leading him toward? The light grew brighter as they approached, revealing a small circular structure nestled among the trees. It pulsed softly, its surface smooth and metallic. The girl hesitated, her expression conflicted. This is home, she said quietly, though her tone carried a note of sorrow. Sam frowned, glancing at her. Home. I thought your world was destroyed. She nodded, stepping closer to the structure. This is all that's left. A fragment. Hidden here, long ago. Before Sam could process her words, the air around them shifted again. A low, resonant hum filled the clearing, and the structure began to glow more intensely. The girl froze, her body tensing. They found us, she whispered. Sam's stomach dropped. He turned to see the drones emerging from the trees, their searchlights locking onto them. But there was something else, something larger. Behind the drones, a massive hulking machine stepped into view, its movements slow but deliberate. It was unlike anything Sam had seen before, a towering behemoth of metal and light. The girl grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the structure. Inside, she said urgently. Now. Sam didn't argue. They sprinted to the structure, its surface rippling as the girl placed her hand against it. A doorway appeared, and they stumbled inside just as a blinding beam of light shot past them, scorching the ground where they had stood. The interior of the structure was unlike anything Sam had imagined. It was larger on the inside, its walls lined with panels that glowed faintly. The air was cool and filled with a faint hum, as if the entire place was alive. The girl moved to a central console, her fingers flying over the controls. Symbols and lights danced across the surface, incomprehensible to Sam. What is this place? He asked, his voice echoing in the chamber. She didn't look up. A ship. Ancient. Hidden here. For emergencies. Sam's eyes widened. You're saying this thing can fly? She nodded, her expression grim. If it still works. Outside, the drones and the massive machine surrounded the structure, their lights converging on it. The ground shook as the larger machine moved closer, its mechanical limbs bristling with weaponry. Sam's heart raced as he watched the girl work, her movements frantic. Can you get it running? He asked, his voice tight with urgency. She didn't answer right away, her focus entirely on the console. Finally, she looked up, her eyes filled with determination. Yes, but it will take time. Sam glanced at the walls, which were beginning to vibrate under the assault of the machines outside. We don't have time, he said, his voice rising. The girl met his gaze, her expression unwavering. I'll hold them off. Sam stared at her, his chest tightening. What are you talking about? You can't. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch steady despite the chaos around them. You helped me. Now I help you. Trust me. Before he could protest, she turned and moved to another part of the ship, her glow intensifying once again. The structure trembled, the walls shifting as if responding to her presence. Sam felt a pang of helplessness as he watched her, his mind screaming for a way to fight back. Outside, the machines prepared their final assault, their lights converging on the ship. Inside, Sam clenched his fists, the tension unbearable. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. The stakes had never been higher. The ship shook violently as the first barrage of fire from the drones hit its exterior. Sam braced himself against the wall, his heart hammering in his chest. The girl stood at the far end of the chamber, her glow now so intense it illuminated the entire room. The console she worked on pulsed with life, its alien symbols shifting and flickering as if reacting to her touch. Outside, the massive machine roared, its mechanical limbs preparing to unleash another devastating attack. Sam could hear the relentless hum of the drones circling the ship, their searchlights cutting through the darkness. He couldn't see them, but he could feel their presence, an oppressive force closing in on them with every second. "Whatever you're doing," he shouted over the noise, "you need to do it faster." The girl didn't respond. Her focus was unbroken, her hands moving in a blur over the console. Suddenly, the ship emitted a low, resonant hum, the walls vibrating in response. A faint light began to spread across the chamber, crawling up the walls like liquid energy. Sam's breath caught in his throat as the ship seemed to come alive around them. "We're close," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "But the shields, they're weak." Sam looked at her, his chest tightening. "What does that mean?" She hesitated, her glow dimming slightly as she turned to face him. "The ship can't protect us and fight them at the same time. It's too old." He stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "So what do we do? Just sit here and wait for them to tear us apart?" Her eyes softened, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something deeply human in her expression. Fear, determination, and a quiet resolve. "I can strengthen the shields," she said, "but I have to connect with it." Sam frowned, his stomach sinking. "Connect? What does that mean?" She glanced at the console, her voice barely above a whisper. "I become part of it." The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. "No," he said, his voice firm. "There's got to be another way." She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "This is the only way. The ship was made for my kind. It will listen to me, protect you." Sam shook his head, his voice rising. "Protect me? What about you? You can't just." The ship shuddered again, cutting him off. Outside, the massive machine unleashed another blast, the impact sending a shockwave through the chamber. The lights flickered, and Sam stumbled, catching himself against the wall. "There's no time," she said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "You have to trust me, please." Sam felt his throat tighten, his mind racing. Every instinct screamed at him to stop her, to find another solution. But deep down, he knew she was right. He met her gaze, his voice breaking. "Don't do this." She offered a small, sad smile. "You saved me. Now it's my turn." Before he could say another word, she turned back to the console, her glow intensifying. The light spread across the chamber, growing brighter and brighter until Sam had to shield his eyes. The hum of the ship deepened, its energy building to a crescendo. He felt the air around him shift, charged with a power that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Outside, the drones and the massive machine unleashed their full arsenal, their weapons pounding against the ship's exterior. But the energy field surrounding the ship grew stronger, deflecting the attacks with a brilliance that lit up the night. Sam watched in stunned silence as the girl's form seemed to dissolve into the light. Her body became a shimmering silhouette, merging with the ship's energy. He wanted to scream, to stop her, but he couldn't move. His legs felt like lead, his heart breaking as he realized there was nothing he could do. The ship roared to life, its engines igniting with a force that shook the ground. A shockwave erupted from the energy field, sending the drones and the massive machine flying backward. The air was filled with a deafening sound, a mixture of metallic screeches and the hum of raw power. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the chaos stopped. Sam blinked, his vision slowly adjusting to the dim light inside the chamber. The ship was still, its walls glowing softly. The hum had subsided, replaced by an eerie silence. He stumbled toward the console, his hands shaking. Are you still here?" he whispered, his voice breaking. There was no response. He sank to his knees, his chest heaving as the reality of what had happened washed over him. She was gone, and he was alone. But then, a faint light appeared on the console. It pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. Sam stared at it, his breath catching. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the surface. The light brightened, and for a brief moment, he felt something, her presence. It was faint, like a whisper in the back of his mind. But it was there. The ship's engines hummed softly, and the console flickered with new symbols. A message appeared, written in a language he couldn't understand but somehow felt he could. It was a farewell, a promise, and a hope all at once. Sam closed his eyes, his hand resting on the console. The girl had given everything to save him, to save the planet. And though she was gone, her sacrifice had left behind a legacy, a ship that could protect Earth from the threats she had warned about. As the ship prepared to lift off, Sam opened his eyes, his resolve hardening. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: he wouldn't let her sacrifice be in vain. The ship rose into the sky with a low, steady hum, the forest below shrinking into darkness as Sam stared out through the small viewport. The ground, still scared by the battle, seemed impossibly far away now. He felt the vibration of the engines beneath his feet, their rhythm steady and calming, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions inside him. She was gone. The girl who had stepped into his life like a fleeting light, brighter than anything he'd ever known, had given herself to this ancient ship. Her presence was everywhere, yet it felt like a hollow reminder of what he'd lost. He sat back against the wall of the control room, the faint glow of the console casting long shadows. The symbols on the panels shifted and danced, almost as if the ship were alive, adapting to his presence. Every so often, he swore he could hear a faint echo in his mind, her voice, soft and reassuring. But it was fleeting, like a memory just out of reach. Sam's hand hovered over the console, where the pulsing light continued to flicker, faint but steady. It wasn't her, not really, but it was all he had left. "I don't even know your name," he whispered, his voice breaking. The thought struck him harder than he'd expected. They had shared so much in such a short time, facing danger, trusting each other with their lives, and yet he didn't even know what to call her. The ship responded with a gentle hum, almost as if it had heard him. A line of alien text scrolled across the console, and for the first time, he found he could read it. It wasn't in words but feelings, emotions translated into something his mind could understand. "You called me what I needed to be." That was enough. He exhaled sharply, a bittersweet smile tugging at his lips. "You always had a way of making things seem so simple." The ship shifted slightly, the view outside now filled with stars. Sam felt a pang of awe despite everything. The vastness of space stretched out before him, an endless expanse of possibilities. He had never thought he would see something like this, let alone survive the ordeal that had brought him here. The planet below seemed so small now, a fragile sphere suspended in the void. But his awe was tempered by the weight of the questions still lingering in his mind. The girl had hinted at something bigger, dangers that went beyond the drones and the massive machine that had attacked them. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The ship, now his reluctant companion, held secrets he wasn't sure he was ready to uncover. As if in response, the console flared to life again, displaying a series of images and data. Sam leaned forward, his brow furrowing. It was a map, or at least something resembling one, with points of light scattered across its surface. One of the lights pulsed brighter than the rest, drawing his attention. It was far from Earth, farther than he thought possible, but he felt an inexplicable pull toward it. The console's light shifted, forming more symbols. This time, the message was clear. They're coming. Sam's stomach tightened. He had no idea who they were, but he didn't need an explanation to understand the urgency. The girl had sacrificed herself to ensure he and the ship could escape, but it was clear now that escape was only temporary. Whatever threat was looming, it wasn't over. And he couldn't ignore it, not after everything she had done. He straightened, his jaw tightening. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "If this is what you wanted me to do, I'll do it. But I'm going to need your help." The ship's hum deepened, almost as if in agreement. The console displayed more information, details about the ship's systems, its capabilities, and its limitations. Sam absorbed as much as he could, though the alien technology was still largely a mystery to him. He would have to learn fast if he was going to survive whatever came next. Days passed in a blur as Sam explored the ship, piecing together fragments of its history. He found small traces of her, holographic recordings, echoes of her voice embedded in the systems. She had been part of something much larger, a last remnant of a people who had once thrived, but were now gone. The ship was their legacy, a vessel designed to protect and preserve what little remained. As he worked, Sam found himself talking to her, even though he knew she couldn't answer. It was a way to keep her memory alive, to remind himself why he was doing this. He told her about his life before all of this, about the quiet days spent fixing old machinery and dreaming of a life beyond the confines of his small town. He told her how she had changed everything, how she had given him a purpose he never knew he needed. One day, as he sat in the control room, staring out at the endless expanse of stars, the ship's hum shifted. A new message appeared on the console, and this time, it wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. The point of light on the map pulsed again, and Sam felt a strange sense of anticipation. It was as if the ship was urging him forward, guiding him toward something he couldn't yet understand. He took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "Let's see where this takes us." The ship's engines roared to life, propelling them toward the unknown. As the stars blurred into streaks of light, Sam felt a strange sense of peace. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't alone. She was still with him, in every hum of the ship, in every flicker of light on the console. And as long as he carried her memory, he knew he could face whatever came next. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, Sam felt ready. The girl had given him more than just a second chance. She had given him a reason to keep going, to fight for something bigger than himself. And as the ship hurtled through the stars, he silently vowed to honor her sacrifice, no matter what challenges lay ahead.